Hello everyone, this is Just a Dad. Today I'm going to show you some tips. If you got a brand new Keurig Case Supreme, I'm going to show you some tips and things I've learned while brewing coffee with them. So this holds true for all three Case Supremes. On the right, I've got the Case Supreme, the original one. In the middle, I've got the Case Supreme Plus. And on the left, I got the brand new Case Supreme Plus smart coffee maker that connects to Wi-Fi. First off, I love these coffee makers, but they do have some things you just got to stay on top of with them. And the things I'm going to tell you hold true for all three. So first off, all three have multi-brew technology. They've got these 5 needles up at the top, okay? And a lot of viewers say that they'll get coffee grounds in their coffee. Now, I don't experience that as much as maybe some other viewers. There are some things that I do to kind of help prevent that. So the first thing to help prevent that, so you can see there's quite a bit of coffee buildup on this one. I've brewed about 8 cups of coffee with it. And make sure you take your K-cup out when you're done brewing. So if you leave these K-cups in here, it can lead to clogging the needles up at the top. So I have found that if I keep up on a freshwater rinse at least once a week, so if I just make sure I don't have I leave the K-cup area empty, close the lid, and again, this holds true for all three of these, just do a 6 ounce or an 8 ounce hot water. Just run fresh water through there. That does help keep the needles clean. Now, if your needles do become clogged, I do have a separate video on how to clean the needles. And it's also a good idea to remove this lower needle basket once in a while. It comes apart and we need to clean it too once in a while. Now, don't be surprised when you do these freshwater rinses, the water's going to come out kind of coffee stained and you will see some coffee grounds in it. Okay, so here's that freshwater rinse. You can see there's definitely some coffee grounds in it. And it did a good job of cleaning the needles. Now, even though sometimes you'll see coffee grounds up here, and for me, they don't make it around to the coffee because when your K-cup is in there, you've got this seal here, so the coffee grounds kind of stay on the top. They don't work their way around the K-cup to get in this area here. Now, sometimes they do. That's not to say I've never had coffee grounds in my coffee. I have had coffee grounds in my coffee, but by keeping up on the freshwater rinses and cleaning your needles once in a while, it really does help stop them. So a lot of people ask me, will it take any K-cup? So it'll take any standard K-cup. They can be generic. They don't necessarily have to be made by Keurig, but they do have to be kind of in the standard K-cup design. Now, some pods do work better than others. I have found that most of the ones made by Keurig do work a little bit better. But Walmart makes a bunch of K-cups made by Great Value. Those all work in these very well. So like older Keurigs had a technology that would prevent you from brewing a cup of coffee. These do not have it. Even though this one connects to the Wi-Fi and it's got this special brew ID, it never prevents you from brewing a K-cup. The brew ID is simply there to give you some recommended settings for brewing the K-cup. So all three of these have a high altitude mode. So if you live in like Denver or a high elevation, you may notice that when you brew a K-cup and you brew 8 ounces, you don't get the full 8 ounces, but you get a bunch of steam, kind of maybe even coming up here or around the K-cup. That means that your water is boiling too fast. And you've got to put it into high altitude mode. When you put it into high altitude mode, your water won't be heated up as much, so it won't boil off. Because water boils at a lot lower temperature when you're at a higher altitude. And I have videos on how to put all three of them in the high altitude mode. Okay, so this next one is the Descale light. So this one's probably caused the most grief with these Supremes. So older Keurigs had a Descale light, and these have a Descale light. This will tell you to descale, and the screen on this one will tell you to descale. Now, Keurig changed the way they light that light. On older Keurigs, they must have sensed how much a mineral buildup was on the inside of the machine, and then it would light the light. That's not the case with these Supremes. With the Keurig Case Supremes, they will light that light after 250 brews, no matter what. No matter how dirty the machine is on the inside or clean. So Miss Fiona has come to help with the reviews. Okay, so you say lighting the light, that's not a big deal, but they've changed the way to get the light to go out. You have to put the machine into what's called a descale mode. And it's kind of complicated to get it into descale mode. I've got videos on how to put all three into descale mode. Here's the thing. Once you put it into descale mode, you got to use either vinegar or the Keurig solution. You've got to run it completely through that descale mode from start to finish, and you can't interrupt it. If you interrupt it, the light will stay on and you'll come out of descale mode and you got to do it all over again. So when the time comes, be sure and check out those videos. I've got a specific video on how to descale each one using either vinegar or the Keurig solution. So that subject brings me on to the next subject, which is there's a thermostat inside here that may trip and that you can reset. Okay, so I took a Keurig Case Supreme apart, and I've taken one of each of these apart, and they all look the same on the inside. So down in the middle here, we've got the heating element, and on the heating element, there's a thermostat. I have a video on how to take this apart, how to troubleshoot that thermostat, and how to reset it. It can be done. Just make sure anytime you've got that cover open that it is unplugged, and you don't plug it in again until you put the cover back on. So here's what that heating element looks like on the inside. And right there, this is the thermostat, and this thermostat trips, but you can reset it with a paper clip, press it in that little hole right there. So there's been various reasons why that thermostat trips. Now, when you're doing the descale, you're running the machine a lot. And what I think happens, and other viewers have kind of told me too, that this overheats and trips it. Because you're running so much, you've got to do so many brews. That descale mode is kind of long. You're doing brew after brew after brew of the vinegar or the descale, and then you got to do a brew after brew after brew with fresh water. Now they're recommending, I've had some viewers say we need to rest 30 minutes between when you run the vinegar through to when you run the fresh water through. So after you run the vinegar or the descaling solution, let the machine rest for 30 minutes and then finish the rinse cycle. I've had some viewers, they remove the water tank during a brew. Now, I know everybody thinks that, well, yeah, of course you don't do that, but it happens. And a lot of times it's an accident or just, maybe somebody forgets what's going on. But if you ever remove the water tank while the machine is brewing, it also trips that thermostat. What happens is the pump just runs out of water. This is being told to heat up with not much water going through it, and then the thermostat pops. Now, there's also another thing that can pop the thermostat if the water pump dies. So I've taken a Keurig apart and the thermostat was tripped. I reset it and plugged it in. It still tripped again. Well, the water pump wasn't pumping. So if there's a water pump in here that pumps water through this, and if it fails, this is always going to just heat up without water going through it. In all those cases, so you don't have to take your machine apart. If your thermostat trips, give Keurig a call. They know about this problem, and in most cases, they do send you a new Keurig, or if it's a really, really old Keurig, they may give you a percentage off of a newer Keurig. And so this holds true for the Case Supreme Plus Smart. They just released this one, and it's got the exact same heater and thermostat in here with the exact same problems. So I get this the next subject is mold, or how dirty do these machines get on the inside? So I've taken apart probably 20 Keurig machines. I haven't found any of them to be dirty on the inside. I have seen some mineral buildup in the tubing, but I've not seen mold. Now, that's not to say that you'll never see mold, like say if you leave water in it and leave it in there for a couple years or a year, you may find mold. What I have found that happens after about 4 or 5 months, there is some water in some of these lines, but it just eventually evaporates out. But what most Keurigs do they have an air pump in them. So on this side here, on that left side, we had the water pump. This side is the air pump. And what it does, at the end of the brew, you'll hear that gush come out. Well, it sends a gush of air through the tubing. Now, it doesn't clean all the tubing out, but it does get a vast majority of the tubing. It'll shoot some air in to flush out the rest of the hot water. And again, there are some tubing that doesn't get flushed out by the pump, but I have never found, I don't know if the tubing is made out of some special material or something, but I just haven't seen Keurigs real dirty. So I get the question a lot, can you use your own coffee grounds? Yes, I have a video that show you how to use your own coffee grounds using this My K-Cup reusable coffee filter. So you're going to see lots of reusable K-Cups on the market, But you got to keep in mind, this has the 5 needles. Most of them they sell are for the older Keurigs had a single needle. Now you can use this one on the single needle. It's got this special red seal that there's been some debate about whether you leave it in or take it out. So when you use this K-Cup with a K Supreme, which has the 5 needles, you remove the red plug. So we put our own coffee grounds into here. It holds about 2 tablespoons, just a little bit more than 2 tablespoons. You put it in here. You got to make sure it gets locked. And again, I've got separate videos on how to do it specifically for each one. And then I can put this in each machine and brew my own coffee grounds. You've got to take this out, and then this sits right here. Like that. You close the needle, you close the lid, and you can brew your own coffee grounds. I've tried several. Like there's some pink ones that have the 5 holes in the top that you leave this in. I haven't found any that work really well. This one does work really well. It's like 10 or 12 bucks, but it's made very well and it just works. So the next question I get a lot is, see the carbon water filter in the water tank? So some coffee makers come with them and some do not. You do not need to have this installed to make coffee. All it does is it helps with the taste of the water. You can leave, so if your coffee maker didn't come with this, it'll brew just fine using tap water. You don't have to use this. It does help remove some of the chlorine taste and smell from your water. And but if your coffee maker didn't come with it, you got to buy these are called tall Keurig water handles. You got to buy them, and then the carbon filters are replaceable in the bottom. And then that sort of leads me to the next question I get a lot is, what type of water to use? So you can use bottled water, filtered water, or tap water. They just don't recommend, they don't want you to use distilled water. Distilled water has no minerals in it, and heating elements need minerals to work properly and for your coffee to taste proper. So again, any type of water other than distilled water. So I've not had any problems with all 3 of these Keurig K Supremes, other than probably coffee grounds. But if you keep up on fresh water rinsing, that does help a lot. Thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate everybody's support. If you've got any questions at all, even if you're having trouble finding a certain video on one of these machines, leave them in the comments. I'll put a link to it in the comments. I look at my comments on a daily basis. Everybody's been very supportive. So I may not know the answer, but a lot of people know these Keurigs more than I do, and they'll answer your comments also. Thanks again, everybody. If you could, please like and subscribe.